A mother is supposed to be the one person who puts her children's safety above everything else, above money, above ambition, above her own needs. When the world is dangerous and the odds are stacked against you, your mother is supposed to be the one pulling you away from harm, not pushing you toward it. That is the most basic expectation of parenthood. Protect your children. Keep them safe. Give them a future. But for the children in these cases, the person who endangered them most was the same person who raised them. Their own mother. The woman who fed them, clothed them, and put a roof over their heads was the same woman who trained them to smuggle drugs across international borders, who sent teenagers through airport customs carrying millions of pounds worth of cocaine, and who built an entire criminal empire using her own sons and daughters as the people who carried the risk. These were not children who stumbled into crime on their own. They were recruited, trained, deployed by the one person who had more power over their lives than anyone else on earth. And when the operations collapsed and the sentences came down, the children paid the price in decades behind bars, while the mothers who created the whole thing watched from the dock. Today, we are covering mothers who turned their own families into criminal organizations. What you are about to hear will challenge everything you believe about the lengths a parent will go to, not to protect their children, but to exploit them. Section number 1. Waterlily Road in Manningham, Bradford, is a residential street. Terraced houses, families, neighbours who know each other by name. The kind of street where people take their bins out on the same day and wave at each other on the school run. Farzana Kauser lived on that street with her children. She was 54 years old. She had 4 sons, 1 daughter and a daughter-in-law who was close enough to the family to be part of the household. To anyone who lived near her, worked with her or spoke to her in passing, Kauser was a mum. A normal one. A thoughtful one. The kind of woman who raised her kids, kept her home together, and gave absolutely no indication that anything about her life was out of the ordinary. That description didn't come from a neighbour or a friend. It came directly from the National Crime Agency. Rick Mackenzie, the NCA's senior investigating officer on her case, said it plainly after the investigation was over. To her friends and people who thought they knew her, Farzana Kauser was a thoughtful, loving mum who seemed very normal. Those were his exact words. And the reason he had to say them at all is because Farzana Kauser was none of the things people believed she was. She was, according to that same NCA officer, very well practiced in her life as a high-end cocaine trafficker. She had been doing it long enough and carefully enough that nobody around her had the slightest clue. She took great pains to delete any trail of evidence. She left nothing behind. No digital footprint, no paper trail, no loose conversations. She ran the entire UK side of an international drug smuggling operation and managed to do it while living on a quiet residential street in Bradford, surrounded by people who thought she was just a mum picking up her kids from school. The operation Kauser was running stretched far beyond West Yorkshire. She was not working alone, and she was not a low-level player in someone else's organisation. She was the person in charge on the British end. Her connection on the other side of the world was an unidentified accomplice based in Pakistan. The NCA never publicly named this person. In every report, every press release, every court filing, this individual was referred to only as Uncle. That was the name Kauser and her network used for this contact. Uncle helped her mastermind the entire smuggling pipeline. The cocaine itself originated in Cancun, Mexico. It was high purity, meaning it had not been cut or diluted. This was product that came directly from the source, and it was being moved in enormous quantities across international borders, through airports, through customs, and directly into the United Kingdom. Kauser's role was command and control. She decided when the trips happened. She decided who went. She decided how the drugs moved once they arrived in England. She coordinated with Uncle in Pakistan and with the contacts in Mexico who had access to the cocaine. And critically, access to the airport infrastructure in Cancun. Everything flowed through her. She gave the orders. She managed the logistics. She trained the people who carried the drugs. And the people she trained were not hired criminals, not strangers recruited from the street, not associates she had met through years in the drug trade. They were her own children. Farzana Kawsar had 5 children. Her eldest son, Junaid Shafak, was 33 years old. Her second son, Mohammed Amir Shafak, was 28. Her third son, Umair Mohammed, was 22. Her daughter, Safa Noor, was 19 at the time of sentencing, but had been a teenager during the period the crimes took place, born in September 2005. And her youngest son, Hamza Shafak, was 18 at sentencing, but had been just 17 years old when his mother brought him into the operation. He was born in June 2007. He was still a child by legal definition when Farzana Kawsar decided he was old enough to carry millions of pounds worth of cocaine through an international airport. Her daughter-in-law, Sarah Hussain, 28 years old, who lived on Hollybank Road in Bradford, was also part of the network. Every single person Kawsar recruited into this operation shared her bloodline or her family name. The only exception in the entire conspiracy was a man named Khaled Abdul Kawi, 36, from Halesowen in Dudley, who acted as an outside courier collecting drugs on behalf of a completely separate organised crime group. Everyone else was family. This is what made the case so unusual, and, as the Crown Prosecution Service later described it, particularly concerning. Drug trafficking operations in the United Kingdom are typically built on trust between criminals who have known each other for years, or on hierarchies within established gangs where loyalty is enforced through violence or money. Kawsar built hers on something far more binding than any of that. She built it on the fact that her couriers were her sons and her daughter. They lived with her. They depended on her. She was their mother. And she used that relationship, every part of it, to make them do exactly what she needed them to do. The NCA's Rick Mackenzie did not mince his words about this. He said that Kawsar led this crime group with dedication and determination. He said she often instructed her children on how to smuggle the drugs effectively and on what techniques to employ. She was not simply the person who gave the green light for each trip. She was the person who sat her children down and taught them how to do it. How to behave at the airport, how to collect the right suitcases, how to walk through customs without raising suspicion, how to carry themselves like ordinary travellers returning from a short holiday, when they were actually moving 30 kilograms of cocaine per suitcase. She gave them the playbook, she rehearsed it with them, and then she sent them out to execute it again and again, starting in August 2024 and running through to November of that same year. At least 5 successful importation trips in the space of 3 months, each one using the same method, each one involving her children walking through Birmingham Airport with bags that did not belong to them, filled with drugs that could have put them in prison for decades. And that is exactly what happened. Her children are now serving combined sentences that add up to more than 60 years behind bars. Her youngest son, Hamza, the one who was 17 when she recruited him, has not even been sentenced yet. That will happen in October 2025. He pleaded guilty to participating in the activities of an organised crime group. His future, whatever it might have been at 17, is now defined by a criminal conviction for international drug trafficking. His sister Safa, who was also a teenager during the offending period, received 7 years and 2 months. Her eldest son, Junaid, got 10 years and 9 months. Mohammed Amir got 8 years and 9 months. Umair got 8 years and 1 month. Every single one of them will spend years of their lives in prison, because their mother decided that her children were the safest, most reliable couriers she could find. Mackenzie said it directly. She pushed her children into huge danger, and has allowed their futures to be effectively destroyed. That sentence, coming from a senior NCA officer who investigates organised crime for a living, carries weight. This is a man who has seen drug trafficking networks built by career criminals, by gang leaders, by people who have spent their entire adult lives in the narcotics trade, and even by his standards, what Fazana Kauza did to her own family was worth singling out. She did not just involve her children in crime, she systematically trained them, deployed them, and exposed them to the kind of legal consequences that will follow them for the rest of their lives, all while maintaining the appearance of a normal household on a quiet street in Bradford, all while deleting every trace of evidence that might connect her to any of it. Fazana Kauza pleaded guilty to importing 180 kilograms of cocaine at a previous hearing in May 2025. She was sentenced on July 18, 2025 at Birmingham Crown Court. The judge gave her 13 years and 4 months. She will spend well over a decade in prison. When she eventually gets out, her children will have criminal records that can never be erased. Her youngest son will have spent some of the most formative years of his life behind bars for something his own mother told him to do. Her daughter, who was a teenager when this started, will carry a conviction for conspiracy to import Class A drugs for the rest of her adult life. And the person in Pakistan who helped make all of it possible, the unidentified accomplice known only as Uncle, has never been publicly named, never been arrested, and remains completely unaccounted for. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the prison sentences and the destroyed futures are only part of this story. Because what made the NCA's case against Kauza so devastating was not just the fact that she used her children, it was how she used them. The method she devised to move cocaine from Cancun, Mexico, through Birmingham Airport and into the streets of the United Kingdom was so carefully designed, so precisely timed, and so ruthlessly efficient that it worked without a single failure for months, and it only fell apart because the NCA was already watching. Section number 2. The method Fazana Kauza designed to move cocaine from Mexico into England was built on one very simple idea. International airports are chaos. Hundreds of flights land every day. Thousands of passengers stream through arrivals halls. Baggage carousels spin with suitcases that look identical to each other. Security staff and customs officers are scanning for obvious red flags, for nervous travellers, for people who do not match their story, for bags that trigger alerts. What they are not doing, because it would be physically impossible, is checking whether every single passenger walking through the arrivals gate is picking up the correct suitcase. Kauza understood this, and she built an entire smuggling pipeline around that gap. The operation worked like this. First, the cocaine had to get onto a plane heading to the United Kingdom. That part required someone on the inside. Somewhere in Cancun, Mexico, there was a corrupt airport insider who had access to the baggage loading process. This person's job, or at least their access, allowed them to place suitcases onto flights that were departing Cancun and heading to Birmingham Airport. These suitcases were not checked in by any passenger. They were not attached to any boarding pass. They were not logged through the normal system that connects a piece of luggage to a specific traveller. They were loaded onto the aircraft unaccompanied, packed full of high-purity cocaine and placed into the cargo hold alongside the legitimate bags of real passengers who had no idea what was sitting next to their holiday clothes. The NCA confirmed this detail explicitly. A corrupt insider had loaded suitcases full of drugs onto the UK-bound flight. Without that person in Mexico, the entire operation collapses. They were the first link in the chain, and Kauza needed them every single time. The second part of the method was getting someone into Birmingham Airport at exactly the right time to collect those suitcases. This is where Kauza's children came in. She would send members of her family on short trips abroad. One night, sometimes 2 nights, to destinations like Dublin or Amsterdam. These were not holidays, they were not business trips, they were positioning flights. The sole purpose of booking these trips was to get her children into Birmingham Airport's arrivals hall at a very specific time, on a very specific day, with a very specific flight from Cancun landing at the same terminal. The family members would fly out to Dublin or Amsterdam without taking any luggage at all. They carried nothing. No suitcase, no checked bag. Just themselves. They would spend a night or two at the destination, and then they would book their return flight to Birmingham so that it landed at the same time as the Cancun flight. The timing had to be precise. Both flights needed to be on the ground at Birmingham Airport at roughly the same window so that the baggage from Cancun would still be circulating on the carousel when Cows's children walked through arrivals. Once they landed at Birmingham, the family did not go to the carousel for their own flight. They had no luggage to collect from their Dublin or Amsterdam flight because they had not taken any. Instead, they walked straight to the Cancun baggage carousel. They knew exactly which carousel it was. They knew exactly which flight they were looking for. And they knew exactly which suitcases to pick up because, before they even landed, an unidentified member of the crime group had sent them photographs of the specific bags they needed to collect. The NCA confirmed this. Cows's children had received photographs of the suitcases from an unidentified member of the crime group. Those photos told them what the bags looked like, so there would be no confusion, no hesitation, no standing around scanning the belt trying to figure out which one was theirs. They walked up. They identified the pre-loaded suitcases from the photos. They pulled them off the carousel. And then they did the thing that made the whole scheme work. They walked through customs as though returning with their own bags. That sentence, which appears in almost every official report about this case, is the core of why the method was so effective. To anyone watching, to any customs officer glancing at the arrivals hall, these were just young people coming back from a trip abroad, collecting their luggage and heading home. There was nothing outwardly suspicious about a group of family members walking through an airport with suitcases. People do it tens of thousands of times a day at Birmingham Airport alone. The suitcases looked normal. The people carrying them looked normal. Nobody was sweating, nobody was running, nobody was acting like they had a reason to be nervous. They had been trained by their mother on exactly how to behave, how to carry themselves, and what techniques to use. They strolled through the customs channel and out the other side, carrying bags that were never theirs, from a flight they were never on, filled with cocaine that had been loaded onto the plane by someone they had probably never met. On the other side of the arrivals gate, Farzana Cowser was waiting. She never flew anywhere herself. She never set foot on a plane to Dublin, Amsterdam, or Cancun. She never personally touched a suitcase full of cocaine inside an airport. She stayed in Bradford, coordinated the operation remotely, and then drove to Birmingham Airport to collect her children once they had made it through customs with the drugs. When asked by NCA officers during her arrest what she was doing at the airport, she said she was just there to pick up her kids. In a technical sense, that was true. She was there to pick up her children. But her children were walking out of the terminal with 180 kilograms of cocaine, divided across 6 suitcases. Once the drugs were out of the airport, the distribution phase began. Some of the cocaine was earmarked for a separate organised crime group. The NCA confirmed that a portion of each shipment was due to be passed to a courier from another OCG. That courier was Khaled Abdul Kawi, 36 years old, from Hales Owen in Dudley. He was the only person involved in the conspiracy who was not a member of Cows's family. His job was to collect his share of the cocaine on behalf of his own crime group and move it through his own distribution network. The rest of the drugs, the portion that was not going to Abdul Kawi's people, was taken back to Cows's home on Waterlily Road in Manningham. From there, it was moved on. The NCA did not publicly detail exactly where the cocaine went after it left Waterlily Road or who bought it, but they confirmed that the house was a staging point. Drugs came in, drugs went out, and Cowser managed the process from the same address where she lived with her children, on the same quiet residential street where her neighbours thought she was an ordinary mother. The reason this method was so dangerous and so effective is that it exploited a vulnerability that is extremely difficult to fix. Airports move millions of bags every year. The system is designed to get luggage from point A to point B as efficiently as possible. When a bag arrives on a carousel, there is no mechanism to verify that the person picking it up is the same person who checked it in. Passengers grab the wrong suitcase by accident all the time. It happens at every airport in the world, every single day. Cowser's method took that everyday occurrence and turned it into a smuggling pipeline. Her children were doing something that millions of travellers do in airports across the globe. They were picking up suitcases from a baggage carousel. The only difference was that the suitcases were not theirs, the flight was not theirs, and the contents were worth £14.4 million on the street. The NCA's investigation determined that this exact method was used at least 5 times between August and November 2024. 5 trips, 5 successful importations. The same technique repeated over and over. Book a short flight to Dublin or Amsterdam. Travel with no luggage. Time the return flight to match the Cancun arrival. Collect the preloaded suitcases from the Cancun carousel using the photos sent ahead of time. Walk through customs. Hand some of the product to Abdul Kawi. Take the rest to Water Lily Road. Move it on from there. Every time the same steps. Every time the same people. Every time the same airport. For 3 straight months, this family walked in and out of Birmingham Airport carrying cocaine with a combined value that ran into the tens of millions. And nobody stopped them. Not once in 4 trips. The 5th trip, on November 11th, 2024, was different, because by that point, the NCA was already watching. The Crown Prosecution Service's Sarah Ingram later said that the defendants thought they had devised a foolproof method to import drugs, and for 4 trips, it looked like they were right. The corrupt insider in Cancun kept loading the bags. The flights kept landing on time. The family kept walking through customs unchallenged. Nobody raised an alarm. Nobody flagged the pattern. Nobody stopped a group of young people from Bradford who kept taking overnight trips to European cities with no luggage and coming back through the Cancun carousel with suitcases that were not on their booking. The system, for all its cameras and scanners and customs officers, did not catch them. It took the National Crime Agency, working from intelligence rather than airport observation, to identify what was happening and build a case that would bring the whole operation down in a single afternoon. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the suitcases and the flights and the carousels are only the mechanics. The real story of this operation is not about how the drugs moved through the airport. It is about who Kauza chose to carry them. Because every single person she sent through that arrivals hall, every single courier who walked past customs with cocaine in their hands, was someone she had raised from birth. And 2 of them were still teenagers when she put them on those planes. Section number 3. Most drug trafficking organisations in the United Kingdom are built on one thing: trust between criminals. People who have known each other for years. People who have done prison time together. People who grew up on the same estate, ran in the same circles, and proved their loyalty through smaller crimes before being trusted with anything significant. That trust is hard to build and easy to break. One person talks to police and the whole network comes apart. One courier gets greedy and skims product off the top, and the entire supply chain is compromised. One weak link anywhere in the chain, and everyone above them is exposed. This is the fundamental problem of organised crime. You need people you can rely on, and reliable people are difficult to find when every single person involved has a reason to save themselves if things go wrong. Farzana Kauza solved that problem in a way that most drug traffickers never consider. She did not recruit associates. She did not build alliances with other criminals. She did not need to test anyone's loyalty over years of escalating offences. She used her family, her own children, the people she had raised, fed, housed, and controlled for their entire lives. The people who lived under her roof on Water Lily Road in Manningham. The people who would do what she told them to do because she was their mother, because she had authority over them that no gang leader could ever replicate, and because most of them had never known any other way of life. The NCA described the operation as predominantly a family affair, and that phrase does not even begin to capture what Kauza actually did. She took the single most protected relationship in human society, the bond between a parent and a child, and she turned it into a drug trafficking infrastructure. Her eldest son was Junaid Shafak. He was 33 years old at the time of sentencing. He lived on Water Lily Road in Bradford, the same street as his mother. Of all Kauser's children, Junaid was the one who had been an adult the longest. He was old enough to have a career, a family of his own, a life completely separate from his mother's criminal activity. He was 32 and 33 during the period between August and November 2024 when the smuggling trips were taking place. The Crown Prosecution Service records show his date of birth as September 28, 1991. He had been alive for over 3 decades when his mother sent him through Birmingham Airport with suitcases full of cocaine. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to evade the prohibition on the importation of a controlled drug of Class A. The judge sentenced him to 10 years and 9 months. It was the second highest sentence handed down in the case, matched only by Khaled Abdul Qawi, the outside courier. Of all the children Kauser used, Junaid's involvement raises one of the harder questions about this case. At 33 years old, he was not a child being manipulated by a parent. He was a grown man who made a choice. Whether that choice was shaped by decades of his mother's influence, by financial pressure, by loyalty, or by greed, is something the publicly available evidence does not answer. What the evidence does confirm is that he was there. He flew. He collected the bags. He walked through customs. And he did it more than once. Mohammed Amir Shafak was the second son, 28 years old, also living on Waterlily Road. Born on January 1st, 1997. Like his older brother, Amir was a full adult during the entire period of offending. He was 27, turning 28, when he boarded flights to Dublin or Amsterdam with no luggage, timed his return to match the Cancun arrivals, and collected suitcases of cocaine from a carousel that had nothing to do with his own flight. He pleaded guilty to the same charge as his brother, conspiracy to import Class A drugs. His sentence was 8 years and 9 months. Nearly a decade of his life, handed down in a courtroom in Birmingham because his mother decided he was useful as a courier. The third son was Umair Mohammed, 22 years old. Waterlily Road again, born on February 4th, 2003. Umair was younger than his brothers by a significant margin. He was 21 during most of the offending period, barely out of his teenage years. At 21, most people in the United Kingdom are finishing university, starting their first job, figuring out what they want to do with their lives. Umair Mohammed was walking through the customs channel at Birmingham Airport, carrying cocaine that had been loaded onto a plane in Cancun by a corrupt insider he had probably never met, following instructions given to him by his own mother, heading toward a car park where that same mother was waiting to drive the drugs back to Bradford. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to import Class A drugs. He received 8 years and 1 month. He will be around 30 years old by the time he is eligible for release, assuming standard prison terms. The years between 21 and 30, the years most people spend building the foundation of their adult lives, will have been spent inside a prison cell. Then there was Safa Noor, Kauser's daughter, 19 years old at the time of sentencing. Born on September 17, 2005. That date matters because it means Safa was 18 when the smuggling trips began in August 2024, having turned 18 less than a year earlier. She had been a legal adult for roughly 11 months when her mother first sent her through an airport carrying Class A drugs. During some of the offending period, depending on exactly which trips she participated in, she may have still been 18. She was the youngest female member of the group and one of the 2 teenagers the NCA referenced in their public statements about the case. Safa pleaded guilty to the same conspiracy charge as her 3 older brothers. She was sentenced to 7 years and 2 months. 7 years. For a teenager. A girl who had barely finished secondary school when her mother began recruiting her into an international cocaine trafficking operation. Safa lived on Waterlily Road with the rest of the family. She grew up in that house. She grew up with Fazana Kauser as her mother, which means she grew up with a woman who the NCA later described as very well practiced in her life as a high-end cocaine trafficker. What Safa knew about her mother's activities before being recruited, how long she had been aware of what was happening in her own home, and whether she ever had a realistic opportunity to refuse, are questions the publicly available reporting does not address. What it does confirm is that she was on those flights. She was at those carousels. She walked through customs, and she is now serving 7 years for it. And then there was Hamza Shafak, the youngest, the one the NCA singled out by name in almost every public statement about this case. Born on June 4, 2007, 17 years old when his mother recruited him. A child, not an adult making a calculated decision, not a 20-something who could reasonably be expected to understand the full consequences of what he was doing. A 17-year-old boy whose mother told him to get on a plane, fly to another country, come back through an airport, pick up suitcases that did not belong to him, and carry them through customs knowing they were packed with cocaine. The NCA's Rick McKenzie addressed Hamza's involvement directly. Her youngest son was just 17 when he was encouraged to play a major role in couriering drugs into the country. The word encouraged in that sentence is doing a lot of work. It implies that Hamza did not come up with this on his own. He was not a teenage drug dealer who sought out his mother's operation. He was brought into it, pushed into it, by the person who was supposed to protect him from exactly this kind of danger. Hamza pleaded guilty to a different charge than his older siblings, while Junaid, Amir, Umair and Safa all admitted to conspiracy to evade the prohibition on the importation of a controlled drug of Class A. Hamza pleaded guilty to participating in the activities of an organised crime group, contrary to Section 45(2)(b) of the Serious Crime Act 2015. This is a lesser charge, and it reflects the fact that Hamza was a minor when the offending took place. He was not sentenced alongside the rest of his family at Birmingham Crown Court on July 18, 2025. His sentencing was deferred. He will stand before a judge in October 2025, at a date still to be set. By then, he will be 18. He will receive his sentence as a legal adult for crimes he committed as a child. Crimes his own mother trained him to carry out. The final family member involved was Sarah Hussein, 28 years old. Unlike the others, she did not live on Waterlily Road. Her address was on Hollybank Road in Bradford. She was Cowser's daughter-in-law, married into the family, and her involvement in the operation was acknowledged by the courts through the same charge that Hamza faced: participating in the activities of an organised crime group under the Serious Crime Act 2015. Sarah pleaded guilty. She was sentenced to 2 years, suspended for 2 years. That means she will not go to prison unless she commits another offence within that 2-year window. Of all the family members involved, she received the lightest outcome by a considerable margin. The court clearly determined that her role was less central than the others, that she was a participant rather than a primary courier, and that a suspended sentence was sufficient. She still has a criminal conviction. She is still a woman in her late 20s with a record for involvement in organised crime. But she will sleep in her own bed tonight, which is more than can be said for her mother-in-law, her husband's brothers, or her sister-in-law. The only person in the entire conspiracy who was not related to Fazana Cowser by blood or marriage was Khaled Abdulkawi, 36 years old, from Hales Owen in Dudley, not from Bradford. His role was distinct from the family's role. He was not one of Cowser's couriers. He was the representative of a completely separate organised crime group that had an arrangement with Cowser to receive a portion of each cocaine shipment. When the family made it through customs with the drugs, some of the product was handed off to Abdulkawi, who then moved it through his own network. He was the buyer, or at least the buyer's agent. He admitted to smuggling Class A drugs and received 10 years and 9 months, the same sentence as Junaid Shafak. The fact that an outside criminal, someone with no family connection to Cowser at all, received the same punishment as her eldest son tells you something about how the court viewed the severity of each person's involvement. Junaid, who had been doing this because his mother told him to, was considered just as culpable as the professional drug courier who was doing it purely for profit. What the CPS's Sarah Ingram said about the case after sentencing gets to the heart of why this family structure mattered so much. She called it particularly concerning because of the family nature of the conspiracy, with a mother recruiting her own children to participate in serious organised crime. That phrase, recruiting her own children, is the one that separates this case from every other drug trafficking operation that passes through UK courts. Drug gangs recruit strangers. They recruit associates. They recruit people who have already demonstrated criminal intent and capability. Farzana Kawsa recruited the people who trusted her most in the world, the people who had no frame of reference for saying no to her, the people whose entire understanding of authority, of right and wrong, of what a mother asks you to do, had been shaped by her for their entire lives. The NCA made it clear that Kawsa was not a passive figure who simply allowed her children to get involved. She was active. She was hands-on. She instructed her children on how to smuggle the drugs effectively and on what techniques to employ. She ran training sessions. She gave them operational guidance. She told them how to act, where to go, what to pick up, and how to get through customs without drawing attention. She was running her household like a briefing room. And the people sitting in that briefing room, absorbing those instructions, preparing for their next trip through Birmingham Airport, were her sons and her daughter, one of whom was still in secondary school age range when she started teaching him how to carry cocaine across international borders. The total number of family members sentenced or awaiting sentencing is 7. Farzana Kawsa herself, Junaid Shafak, Mohammed Amir Shafak, Umair Mohammed, Safa Noor, Hamza Shafak, Sarah Hussein. 7 members of the same family, connected by blood and marriage, all convicted of involvement in the same international drug trafficking operation, all prosecuted in the same court, all brought down by the same NCA investigation. The combined prison sentences for the 6 who have already been sentenced, not including Hamza, who is still awaiting his, add up to more than 60 years. 60 years of collective imprisonment for one family from one street in Bradford. The house on Waterlily Road, where the cocaine was stored and moved on from after each successful importation trip, is now permanently associated with one of the largest family-run drug operations the NCA has ever prosecuted at Birmingham Airport. And every single one of those 60-plus years can be traced back to one person, the woman who planned it, the woman who coordinated with Uncle in Pakistan, the woman who exploited the corrupt insider in Cancun, the woman who booked the flights, sent the photographs of the suitcases, trained the couriers, waited at the arrivals gate and drove the cocaine back to Bradford. The woman who did all of this using her own children as the people who carried the risk, faced the customs officers, and ultimately took the fall. Farzana Kawsa got 13 years and 4 months. Her children, collectively, got more than 4 times that. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the operation did not collapse because someone in the family talked or because a courier got nervous at the airport. It ended on a single afternoon in November 2024, when the NCA decided they had enough evidence and moved in. The arrest happened at the exact place where every successful trip had ended, outside the arrivals hall at Birmingham Airport, with 6 suitcases, 6 family members, and 180 kilograms of cocaine that would never reach the streets. Section number 4. November 11th, 2024 started like every other trip, the same routine that had worked 4 times before. Kawsa's children had flown out of the country on a short trip, 1 or 2 nights, no luggage, just themselves. They had timed their return flight to Birmingham so that it landed at the same window as a flight arriving from Cancun, Mexico. Somewhere in Cancun, a corrupt insider had loaded suitcases full of high-purity cocaine onto that UK-bound aircraft. The bags had no passenger attached to them. They were placed into the cargo hold alongside the luggage of real travellers and sent across the Atlantic with nobody on board to claim them. On the other end, at Birmingham Airport, Kawsa's children would walk off their own flight, head straight to the Cancun baggage carousel, identify the suitcases using photographs that had been sent to them in advance, and collect them as though the bags were their own. Then they would walk through customs and out the other side, where their mother would be waiting to take them and the cocaine back to Bradford. That was the plan. It had worked in August. It had worked in September. It had worked in October. It had worked every single time they had tried it. 4 successful importation trips in 3 months using the exact same method, the exact same airport, and in most cases, the exact same people. According to the NCA, their investigation confirmed that this was at least the 5th time the crime group had couriered high-purity cocaine into Birmingham Airport between August and November 2024. 4 clean runs. No arrests, no seizures, no suspicion from customs officers, no alarm bells from airport security. For 3 months, a family from Bradford had been walking in and out of one of the busiest airports in England, carrying drugs worth millions of pounds, and nobody at that airport had stopped them. The 5th trip was supposed to be the same. The children flew, they landed, they went to the Cancun carousel, they found the suitcases, they collected them. 6 suitcases in total, carried by 6 people. Inside those 6 bags was approximately 180 kilograms of cocaine. The wholesale value, meaning the price if sold in bulk to other drug dealers, was nearly £5 million. The street value, meaning the price if broken down into individual deals and sold directly to users across the UK, was around £14.4 million. That is the weight and the worth of what 6 members of one family were carrying through Birmingham Airport on a Monday in November. They collected the bags, they walked through the arrivals area, they headed for the exit toward the car park, toward the vehicle where their mother was waiting to drive them and the cocaine back to Waterlily Road. They never made it to the car. National Crime Agency officers were positioned outside Birmingham Airport's arrivals area. They were not there by coincidence. They were not conducting a random check. They were not scanning the crowd and hoping to get lucky. The NCA had been investigating Cowser's operation. They knew about the trips. They knew about the method. They knew about the pattern of flights to Dublin and Amsterdam with no luggage, timed to coincide with arrivals from Cancun. They had built a case. And on November 11th, 2024, they decided to act. 6 defendants walked out of the arrivals hall carrying 6 suitcases. NCA officers moved in and arrested all 6 of them on the spot. The CPS later described this as the moment the conspiracy was finally uncovered. But the reality is that the NCA had been watching long before November 11th. This was not an accidental discovery. This was the culmination of an intelligence-led investigation that had tracked the group's movements and established the pattern across multiple trips. Farzana Cowser was also arrested at the airport. She was there, as she always was, to collect her children. When the NCA officers confronted her, she said exactly what you would expect a mother waiting for her kids at an airport to say. She claimed she was only there to collect her children. That was her defence in the moment, a mother picking up her sons and daughter from the airport, completely innocent, completely normal. The NCA noted specifically that she betrayed no outward signs of running the UK side of the crime group, and that even in the moment of her arrest, she maintained that front. She was just a mum. She was just there for her kids. The fact that her kids were carrying 180 kilograms of cocaine in 6 suitcases was, in her telling, nothing to do with her. The NCA knew otherwise. Their investigation had already established Cowser as the organiser, the person who coordinated with Uncle in Pakistan, the person who managed the logistics on the UK end, the person who instructed her children on smuggling techniques, the person who had been running this operation for at least 3 months and had successfully moved high-purity cocaine into the country on at least 4 previous occasions. Her claim that she was just a mum collecting her children from the airport was the same mask she had worn for her entire criminal career, the same front she had maintained on Waterlily Road, the same performance she had given to every neighbour, every friend, every person who thought they knew her. And on November 11th, 2024, the NCA pulled that mask off in a car park outside Birmingham Airport. The seizure itself was enormous. 180 kilograms of cocaine is not a small quantity. To put it in perspective, the average drug seizure in the UK typically involves grams, or at most a few kilograms. What the NCA intercepted that day at Birmingham Airport was nearly 200 kilograms of a Class A controlled substance in a single operation. The cocaine was high purity, meaning it had not been diluted or mixed with cutting agents. It came directly from Mexico, from source-level suppliers, through a pipeline that involved a corrupt insider at an international airport and a network stretching from Cancun to Pakistan to Bradford. The wholesale value of £5 million represents what the drugs would fetch if sold in bulk to mid-level dealers. The street value of £14.4 million represents the total revenue if every gram was eventually sold to individual users at full retail price. Either way you count it, the cocaine seized on November 11, 2024 represents one of the largest single drug seizures connected to a family-run operation that the NCA has prosecuted in recent years. The drugs themselves were photographed by the NCA and CPS and released to the media after sentencing. Images showed the suitcases packed with wrapped packages of cocaine, the kind of industrial-scale packaging that signals direct supply from source countries rather than mid-level distribution. The CPS also released photographs showing members of the gang standing near the baggage carousel at Birmingham Airport, taken as they waited for the suitcases to arrive on the belt from the Cancun flight. These images, captured before the arrests, showed the family going about the collection process exactly as they had been trained to do. Standing, waiting, watching the belt, looking for all the world like ordinary travellers picking up their holiday luggage. After the arrests, every single defendant eventually pleaded guilty. There was no trial. There was no jury. There was no drawn-out legal battle over who knew what and who did what. The evidence the NCA had compiled was strong enough that not one of the 8 defendants attempted to fight the charges in court. Farzana Kauza herself pleaded guilty to importing 180 kilograms of cocaine at a previous hearing. The BBC confirmed this plea was entered in May 2025, approximately 6 months after her arrest. Her 4 eldest children, Junaid Shafak, Mohammed Amir Shafak, Umair Mohammed and Safa Noor, all admitted to the primary charge of conspiracy to evade the prohibition on the importation of a controlled drug of Class A, contrary to Section 1.1 of the Criminal Law Act 1977. That is the full legal wording of what they admitted to. In plain language, they confessed to being part of a planned operation to bring illegal drugs into the United Kingdom. Kauza's youngest son, Hamza Shafak, and her daughter-in-law, Sarah Hussein, pleaded guilty to a different charge. Their offence was participating in the activities of an organised crime group, contrary to Section 45(2)(b) of the Serious Crime Act 2015. This is a less severe charge than the one faced by the older siblings, and it reflects the legal distinction between being a direct conspirator in the drug importation itself and being someone who played a supporting role within the wider criminal organisation. The difference in charge would later be reflected in the difference in sentencing. Sarah Hussein received a 2-year suspended sentence. Hamza Shafak has not been sentenced yet. His hearing is set for October 7, 2025. Khaled Abdul Kawi, the only non-family member, also pleaded guilty. He admitted to smuggling Class A drugs after taking possession of cocaine from Kauza's organised crime group. He was a courier for a separate UK-based OCG, and his role was to collect a portion of each shipment once it had cleared customs. The Express and Star confirmed his address as Alexandra Road, Hales Owen. He received 10 years and 9 months, one of the longest sentences in the case, reflecting the court's view that his involvement in the distribution chain was significant, even though he was not part of the family operation itself. The fact that all 8 defendants pleaded guilty meant that the details of the operation became a matter of public record without the need for a contested trial. The CPS, the NCA, and multiple media outlets were able to publish the full mechanics of the smuggling method, the family structure of the operation, the value of the drugs, and the roles each person played, all based on admitted facts rather than disputed allegations. There was no ambiguity. Nobody claimed they did not know what was in the suitcases. Nobody argued they were coerced. Nobody tried to pin the blame on someone else. They all admitted what they had done. Every one of them. The CPS's Sarah Ingram addressed the case directly after sentencing. She said the defendants thought they had devised a foolproof method to import drugs. That word, foolproof, tells you everything about how confident this group had become after 4 successful trips. They genuinely believed they had found a gap in the system that could not be closed. Fly to Dublin, come back through the Cancun carousel, walk out with the bags, drive home to Bradford. Do it again next month. The method was clean. The method was simple. The method left almost no evidence. Causa deleted digital trails. The corrupt insider in Mexico loaded bags anonymously. The children carried nothing that connected them to the drugs until the moment they picked up the suitcases. For 4 trips, the method was foolproof. Ingram continued. She said that thanks to the vigilance and thorough investigation by the National Crime Agency and their prosecution, the criminal enterprise was brought to an end. She added that by taking this organised crime group out of action, large amounts of drugs had been removed from circulation and could no longer reach the streets. And she said that the case demonstrated the commitment of the Crown Prosecution Service and law enforcement partners to disrupting drug supply chains and bringing those involved in serious organised crime to justice. The operation that Farzana Causa had built from her home in Bradford was over. The method she designed, tested, refined, and repeated 5 times was now a matter of court record. The children she had recruited, trained, and sent through Birmingham Airport were either behind bars or awaiting sentencing. The cocaine that was supposed to reach the streets of the United Kingdom, worth £14.4 million at retail, was sitting in an NCA evidence locker. And the woman who had orchestrated all of it, the woman who claimed she was just there to pick up her kids, was facing the rest of her 50s and a good portion of her 60s inside a prison cell. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the arrest at the airport and the guilty pleas that followed were only half of the story. What happened next, inside Birmingham Crown Court on July 18, 2025, was the moment where the numbers became real, where the sentences were read out one by one, where a mother heard exactly how many years each of her children would spend locked up because of what she had asked them to do, and where the full scale of what Farzana Causa had destroyed, not just the law she had broken, but the futures she had taken from her own family, was laid out in a courtroom for the public record. Section number 5, Birmingham Crown Court, Friday, July 18th, 2025. 8 months after the arrests at Birmingham Airport. 8 months of remand, legal proceedings, guilty pleas, and pre-sentencing reports. 8 months for Farzana Causa and her children to sit with what they had done and what was coming next. The courtroom that day held a mother, 4 of her sons, her daughter-in-law, and 1 outside courier. 7 of them would be sentenced that afternoon. The 8th, her youngest son Hamza, would have to wait until October. The judge worked through the defendants one by one, each name read out, each sentence delivered, each number landing in a courtroom where an entire family sat together for what would be one of the last times in years. Farzana Causa, 54 years old, born March 13, 1971, of Waterlily Road, Manningham, Bradford, the head of the operation. The person who coordinated with Uncle in Pakistan. The person who designed the smuggling method. The person who trained her children in how to carry cocaine through an international airport. The person who instructed them on techniques and logistics. The person who sent teenagers across borders with bags full of Class A drugs. The person who, even at the moment of her arrest, maintained that she was just a mother picking up her kids. The judge sentenced her to 13 years and 4 months. She had pleaded guilty at a previous hearing to importing 180 kilograms of cocaine. 13 years and 4 months means she will be in her mid to late 60s before she has any prospect of release. The woman who ran a multi-million-pound cocaine pipeline from a terraced house in Bradford will spend the next phase of her life in a cell. Junaid Shafak, 33 years old, born September 28, 1991, also of Waterlily Road, Bradford. Her eldest son, the one who had been an adult for over a decade when his mother recruited him into the operation. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to evade the prohibition on the importation of a controlled drug of Class A, contrary to Section 1(1) of the Criminal Law Act 1977. In simple terms, he admitted that he was part of a planned and coordinated effort to bring illegal drugs into the country. The judge gave him 10 years and 9 months. Of all Kawsa's children, Junaid received the longest sentence. His punishment was identical to that of Khaled Abdulkawi, the professional drug courier from a completely separate organised crime group. The court saw Junaid's role as equally serious. He was not a child being manipulated. He was a 33-year-old man who repeatedly flew to European cities, collected cocaine from airport carousels, and walked it through customs. 10 years and 9 months. He will be in his 40s when he gets out. Mohammed Amir Shafak, 28 years old, born January 1st, 1997. Water Lily Road, Bradford. The second son. Same charge as Junaid, same guilty plea. He had been 27 for most of the offending period, turning 28 while the operation was still running. The judge sentenced him to 8 years and 9 months. Nearly a decade taken from a man who had not yet reached 30. Amir will be in his mid-30s before release. The years between 28 and 37. The years that most people spend building careers, starting families, establishing themselves. Gone. Umair Mohammed, 22 years old, born February 4th, 2003, Water Lily Road, Bradford. The third son. Same charge, same guilty plea. Umair was the youngest of the adult sons, 21 during most of the offending window. He had been legally an adult for only 3 years when his mother put him on planes carrying no luggage and had him collect suitcases packed with cocaine from a foreign flight's baggage belt. His sentence was 8 years and 1 month. He will be 30 when he becomes eligible for release. His entire 20s, the decade that shapes most people's adult lives, will be defined by this conviction and the time he spends behind bars because of it. Safa Noor, 19 years old at sentencing, born September 17th, 2005. Water Lily Road, Bradford. Kawsa's daughter. She turned 19 in September 2024, which means she was 18 during the early smuggling trips that summer and had only just turned 19 by the time of the November arrest. She was one of the 2 teenagers the NCA referenced in their public statements. Safa pleaded guilty to the same conspiracy charge as her 3 older brothers. The judge sentenced her to 7 years and 2 months. 7 years. For a girl who was 18 and 19 years old during the offending period. Safa will be in her mid-20s when she eventually walks free. She will have spent the transition from teenager to adult inside a prison. The years where most young women finish education, enter the workforce, build friendships, and figure out who they are, will take place behind locked doors. All because her mother decided she was old enough to carry cocaine through an airport. Khaled Abdulkawi, 36 years old, born August 4th, 1988, of Alexandra Road, Halesowen, Dudley. The only person in the entire conspiracy who was not a member of Kawsa's family. Abdulkawi was a courier for a separate UK-based organised crime group. His role was to collect a portion of the cocaine from Kawsa's operation once it had cleared customs at Birmingham Airport. He took possession of the drugs and moved them through his own distribution network. He pleaded guilty to smuggling Class A drugs. The judge gave him 10 years and 9 months, matching Junaid Shafak's sentence exactly. The court treated the professional courier and the eldest son as equally culpable. Abdulkawi will be in his mid-40s upon release. Sarah Hussain, 28 years old at sentencing, born July 28, 1997, of Hollybank Road, Bradford, Kawsa's daughter-in-law. She pleaded guilty to participating in the activities of an organised crime group contrary to Section 45(2)(b) of the Serious Crime Act 2015. This is a different and less severe charge than the conspiracy to import charge that the older siblings faced. The distinction matters. The court determined that Sarah's involvement was at a lower level. She was part of the operation, she participated in the activities of the criminal group, but she was not charged as a direct conspirator in the importation itself. The judge sentenced her to 2 years in prison, suspended for 2 years. That means Sarah Hussein will not go to prison. She will remain free, but with conditions. If she commits any offence within the next 2 years, she will serve the original 2-year sentence on top of whatever new punishment she receives. Of all 8 defendants, she was the only one who walked out of Birmingham Crown Court that day without being taken into custody. She still has a criminal record. She is still a convicted participant in an organised crime group that imported 180 kilograms of cocaine. But she is free. Her mother-in-law is not. Her husband's brothers and sister are not. And then there was Hamza Shafak, 18 years old at the time of sentencing, born June 4, 2007, Waterlily Road, Bradford, Cowser's youngest son. The child. The one who was 17 when his mother brought him into the operation. The one the NCA's Rick McKenzie specifically singled out when he said her youngest son was just 17 when he was encouraged to play a major role in couriering drugs into the country. Hamza pleaded guilty to the same charge as Sarah Hussein, participating in the activities of an organised crime group under the Serious Crime Act 2015. He was not sentenced on July 18th with the rest of his family. The Express and Star reported that his sentencing date has been set for October 7th, 2025. He will face the judge alone. By then, he will be 18, legally an adult, receiving punishment for crimes committed when he was still a child. The outcome of his sentencing is unknown at this point. The court will have to weigh his age at the time of offending, the role his mother played in recruiting him, the lesser charge he pleaded to compared to his older siblings, and the fact that he was a minor being directed by an adult who had total authority over his life. Whether he receives a custodial sentence or something closer to what Sarah Hussein received remains to be seen. What is certain is that Hamza Shafak, regardless of the sentence, will carry a conviction for participation in organised crime for the rest of his life. He was 17. His mother put him on a plane. The combined custodial sentences for the 6 defendants who were sentenced on July 18th add up to more than 60 years of prison time. 13 years and 4 months for Cowser, 10 years and 9 months for Junaid, 8 years and 9 months for Amir, 8 years and 1 month for Umair, 7 years and 2 months for Safa, 10 years and 9 months for Abdul Kawi. Sarah received a suspended sentence. Hamza has not been sentenced yet. When his sentence is added later this year, the total will climb higher. Over 60 years of collective imprisonment produced by one woman's decision to turn her household into a drug trafficking cell. The NCA's Rick McKenzie gave his statement after the sentences were handed down. He addressed Cowser's double life directly. To her friends and people who thought they knew her, Farzana Cowser was a thoughtful, loving mum who seemed very normal. He said she was very well practiced in her life as a high-end cocaine trafficker and took great pains to delete any trail of evidence. He said she led this crime group with dedication and determination. He said she pushed her children into huge danger and allowed their futures to be effectively destroyed. That final phrase is not rhetoric. It is a factual observation. 4 of her 5 children are now serving prison sentences ranging from 7 to nearly 11 years. Her 5th child is awaiting sentencing for his involvement. Every future they might have had, every career, every relationship, every opportunity has been fundamentally altered by criminal convictions for Class A drug importation. Destroyed is the right word. There is no version of any of their lives going forward that is not permanently shaped by what their mother asked them to do between August and November 2024. Sarah Ingram from the Crown Prosecution Service also spoke after sentencing. Ingram, a unit head for the CPS's Serious Economic, Organised Crime and International Directorate, described the operation as sophisticated and well planned, designed to flood the UK with high-purity cocaine worth millions of pounds. She said what made the case particularly concerning was the family nature of the conspiracy, with a mother recruiting her own children to participate in serious organised crime. Ingram addressed the method directly, saying the defendants thought they had devised a foolproof method to import drugs. She credited the NCA's investigation with bringing the criminal enterprise to an end, and confirmed that by dismantling the operation, large amounts of drugs had been removed from circulation and could no longer reach the streets. Her final statement framed the case as a demonstration of the CPS's commitment to disrupting drug supply chains and bringing those involved in serious organised crime to justice. The charges themselves carry significant legal weight. Conspiracy to evade the prohibition on the importation of a controlled drug of Class A. Contrary to Section 11 of the Criminal Law Act 1977, is one of the most serious drug offences in English law. Class A drugs include cocaine, heroin and ecstasy. The maximum sentence for this offence is life imprisonment. The fact that Causa received 13 years and 4 months rather than life reflects the guilty plea, which typically reduces sentences by up to a third in the English legal system. Without the guilty plea, her sentence could have been substantially longer. The same applies to every other defendant who admitted to the conspiracy charge. Their sentences, long as they are, were reduced from what they could have been because none of them made the court go through a full trial. The lesser charge faced by Hamza and Sarah, participating in the activities of an organised crime group under Section 45(2)(b) of the Serious Crime Act 2015, carries a maximum sentence of 5 years. This is a much lower ceiling, and it explains why Sarah Hussein received a suspended sentence rather than immediate custody. The court recognised that within this family operation there were different levels of involvement. Causa was at the top. Her older children were the primary couriers. Abdul Qawi was the external distribution link. Hamza and Sarah occupied a lower tier, participating in the group's activities without being charged as direct conspirators in the importation itself. There is one figure in this entire case who was never arrested, never charged, never brought before any court, and never publicly identified. Uncle, the unidentified accomplice in Pakistan who worked with Causa to mastermind the smuggling pipeline from Cancun to Birmingham. Every NCA report, every CPS press release, every media article about this case mentions Uncle as a central figure in the conspiracy. Causa could not have run this operation without the connection in Pakistan. The corrupt insider at Cancun Airport, the sourcing of high-purity cocaine from Mexico, the logistics of loading unaccompanied suitcases onto UK-bound flights. All of this required coordination between Causa in Bradford and Uncle in Pakistan. And yet, as of the sentencing date on July 18, 2025, Uncle remains at large. No name, no arrest, no extradition, no charges. The NCA has not publicly stated whether they are pursuing Uncle or whether the investigation into the Pakistan connection is ongoing. What they have confirmed is that Causa worked with this person to mastermind the operation and that the accomplice remains unidentified. The UK side of the network has been dismantled, the courier infrastructure has been destroyed, the family has been sentenced. But the international connection that made the whole thing possible, the person who linked a mother in Bradford to a cocaine supply chain originating in Mexico, is still out there. The corrupt insider at Cancun Airport is another unknown. Somebody with access to the baggage loading system at a major international airport was placing suitcases full of cocaine onto flights bound for Birmingham. This person was never publicly named by the NCA or the CPS. Whether Mexican authorities have been informed, whether an investigation is underway in Cancun, and whether the insider has been identified, are all questions that remain unanswered in the publicly available reporting. The NCA confirmed the existence of this insider as a factual element of the conspiracy. The suitcases were loaded unaccompanied onto the Mexico flight by a corrupt insider. That person enabled every single trip. Without them, there is no cocaine on the plane. Without cocaine on the plane, there is nothing for Causa's children to collect at the carousel. The entire operation depended on someone in Mexico who has never been publicly held accountable. What remains then is a family that no longer exists in any recognisable form. Farzana Causa is in prison. Junaid Shafak is in prison. Mohammed Amir Shafak is in prison. Umair Mohammed is in prison. Safa Noor is in prison. Khaled Abdul Kawi is in prison. Sarah Hussein is free but convicted. Hamza Shafak is awaiting sentencing. The house on Waterlily Road in Manningham, where the cocaine was stored and distributed from after each successful trip, is now part of a criminal record. The neighbours who thought Kauser was a normal mum now know she was running a cocaine pipeline worth tens of millions of pounds from the house next door. The street where her children grew up is the same streets those children left in handcuffs. Farzana Kauser did not lose her family to violence, to illness, or to tragedy. She lost them to her own choices. She chose to traffic cocaine. She chose to use her children as couriers. She chose to send a 17-year-old boy through an international airport carrying Class A drugs. She chose to train her daughter, barely out of her teenage years, in smuggling techniques. She chose to build a criminal empire on the one foundation she thought could never be broken: the loyalty of her own blood. And when the NCA closed in, every single person who carried the risk, who walked through customs, who faced the sentences, was someone she had brought into this world and raised under her roof. 13 years and 4 months is what the judge gave her. Her children, collectively, received more than 4 times that number. The mother who was supposed to protect them handed them futures defined by prison cells and criminal records. And the person in Pakistan who helped her do it has never been named. Farzana Kauser turned her family into a trafficking operation and told herself the method was foolproof. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.